Hey, good
All
morning.
right.
How's everybody doing? It is Tuesday. It's Tuesday, Wednesday? It's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, April 10th of 2024. That's how this week has gone.
hmm
And welcome everybody to the Dev Talk Show. I'm Chris Gomez here with my co-host Rich Ross. How are you doing?
Doing well. I mean, hey, if you're thinking it's Tuesday and it's Wednesday, then I think the week is going quicker than you expected. So,
Yeah. That's not always a good thing though.
no, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got. Yeah, there's a lot going on. This is um, it's crunch time for us because it's the end of our fiscal year now in the fourth quarter. So, everybody wants to come in and have conversations, which is great. But we are super busy.
Oh yeah. Okay. I can imagine. Um it's been a little while since we've been on. Kind of busy to end the last week, and then there was an exciting event Monday
Yeah.
across North America that um, I did not. I was not in the path of totality, but did make a little pinwheel viewer, and so my daughter and I saw the little crescent sun. It's actually really interesting how much sunlight you get from even a little sliver of sun.
hmm
And I think that's what some of the folks who were in totality were saying, is that it doesn't take more than, like, I don't even think it takes a half a second escaping that for it to be like, oh, it's pretty bright again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there. And be curious to hear from somebody who was. I don't know. So,
So, so I was in that pad. We were up in northern New York State, and we woke up that morning. Everything looked great. It was like partly cloudy, as they say, plenty of blue sky. And by the time the event happened, it was full on clouds. We couldn't
oh,
see a
yeah.
thing. I mean, we couldn't even tell where the sun really was in the sky. So it sounds like it was a washout, but I'll be honest with you, the almost 4 minutes of totality
It's
that
still
we
going to be
got to
dark.
experience,
Sure.
it it was, you could see it was like a rainy day, right? The clouds are in the
Yep.
sky, but you can still tell the sun up there, and then all of a sudden it goes into that sliver, disappears, and it is complete darkness. And if it wasn't
Yeah.
for the because we were watching in a parking lot because figured there was nothing around us, we plenty to see. Um, that if it wasn't for the lights around us, it would have been that would have if we were in some place that was completely dark, that
Yeah.
would have really set it. But I mean, just the understanding what's going on around our planet and how
Yeah.
all of those things interact and how instantaneous things went from light to dark was just, it was incredible. It was totally worth everything we took to get up there, hanging out in the dark clouds, and just to see 4 minutes of darkness was
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah. No, certainly there was being live streamed. NASA had a nice live stream, different places. I'm sure a lot of people were really impressed if it, for those moments where you can safely look at the corona.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't, where I was at, we did not get that. But we did have a lot of cloudiness too during kind of like what you would call the peak,
Yeah.
the peak, as much of coverage as we got. And so there were moments where you could tell, like, oh, it's super cloudy, we're not going to be able to see anything. And then all of a sudden it would be kind of light again. And so I'd grab the little pinwheel box and be like, okay, let's look, and so it was cool.
Awesome.
It was cool. So for everybody joining us, thank you for joining us. And we have been working a lot with Blazor and the authentication and authorization pieces, because I think some of the feedback we've gotten from viewers and even ourselves, this is why we kind of embarked on this journey, is that if you take the step in starting a new project of picking individual accounts, then you get an implementation of Blazor that supports individual accounts going to a database with Entity Framework Core, and you are ready to go with a full identity solution, including if you want to add external login support. And by external logins, we mean login with Twitter, login with Google, login with Microsoft, because those are the kinds of things that we're doing nowadays when we're building
Mm-hmm.
sites. Is we're asking ourselves that first question: do I even want to own the login piece?
Right.
Yeah. Do I want to own keeping usernames and passwords? Do I want to ask my user to have yet another password? And I personally have had the feeling for a while that there are two pretty good scenarios where a developer might say, maybe I don't. And one of them is internet facing. just all comers. I think of there's like two types of apps in this world. There's everybody show up. This could be xbox.com. Everyone come on in, sign in. Now, frankly, you sign in with a Microsoft account there, but let's use our imaginations a little bit and say that that's going to an entity framework, SQL Server database, and everybody who comes can choose to browse around, or you can choose to create an account, sign in, start using the shopping cart, buy games, stuff like that. There's also a site that I think a lot of our viewers are eager to create as well, because I know this happens to me, is I'm at work. And at work, we say, we could use a tool to do something for us. It's the I'll make it as generic as possible. We could use a transaction viewer, because we all work somewhere where there's transactions being stored somewhere. And what happens? You end up having to call the database team to say, hey, can we see the transactions for the last quarter? Wouldn't it be cool? Man, we should stop bugging the database team. What if somebody built a tool? Oh, well, should we build a tool like a little WinForms tool? No. What are we using WinForms for? We have the web. Like, let's just build a website. And that sounds like it's the answer to all your problems. Let's just put an intranet website up and we're good. And then somebody says, wait a second, how do we make sure that like only the people who are allowed to view the transactions can view the transactions? Like, once that conversation happens, because before that you could say like, oh, well, we'll keep it in the intranet, so anybody in the company, it's fine. And wait a second, is everybody in the company? Is everybody in the company allowed to do this? And the moment somebody opens their mouth there, now it's like, oh, well, we're gonna need like our own internal login. And what are you gonna do? You're not gonna have people create logins for your tool. What you want is you're probably on like what most of us watching might still consider Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, but called Entra ID. That branding there, but it's the same thing. It's the thing we all love and know.
Yeah.
Say, well, let's just use the corporate Entra ID. Like, what's wrong with that? We'll figure out what roles they're in, and it all sounds great.
Yeah.
And then you file a new project in Blazor, and you go, what do I do? So we're
not far past that. We've gotten a new project up and running.
yeah, right. And so, let's take a look. I've made some change. I'm going to go ahead and present on my screen here, and I've actually made some changes since last time. So I want to share with everyone.
While you're doing that, we'll do quick greetings. Pharaoh Krieger joining us. Welcome. And he brings up a good point. Yes, we don't want the janitor to go run the reports on our intranet site. So I think just some general locking down of what's going on is kind of important here.
And so the first step there for me, and this is what I'm showing now, is I have made some changes. If people have been watching the show, you have seen that when we have gotten to parts of the code that is built into the .NET platform, in Visual Studio, you can still hit like F12 to go to definition, and sometimes Control F12 to push past an interface to the implementation. And we've been doing that in order to say, well, what is it that they're doing now? What is it that they're doing now? I decided to kind of up my game there a little bit. There is a feature in Visual Studio called Enable Just My Code this is going to be checked when you install Visual Studio. And so what happens is, by default, it's not going to let you set breakpoints in code that's not yours. This could be code in a NuGet package. This could be code from ASP.NET. And just because there's some really cool features that will, when you go ahead and hit F10, it's pulling the source down for you like really quickly. It's using like source link. I think it's what it's called. I'm not sure if that's what that feature is called. To just go ahead and grab the code, and then you scroll up to the top. It says licensed by Microsoft. So you're not in your code anymore. You can't set breakpoints there. So I turned off Enable Just My Code. Then I made sure that Enable Source Link Support was checked. And I made sure that these symbol servers were checked. Now, from this point on, when you step into any .NET or ASP.NET Core code, you could set breakpoints in there, and you can debug in there, and that's so that you can stop and view variable values and things like that, right?
Right.
And so I'm going to go ahead and share this. I found this, I have found this to be pretty useful, and I think I do want to say, though, there's pros and cons to it.
Right.
So the pro is that now I can set breakpoints in and step through ASP.NET Core code. The con is the first time you do this, it's got to go get the symbols. And ASP.NET Core is a pretty big project, and you are including a lot of it in your application. So you're going to have like this wait time of the,
Yep.
and it's kind of a first time thing. But this is actually a pretty cool feature of that's kind of enabled in NuGet and Visual Studio and all that all the way around, because if you make internal NuGet packages and you enable source symbol support, which, whole other show, whole other topic, then you as another developer in the organization, or even yourself, you can step straight into the NuGet code that you own, the NuGet based code that you own, and that can be really helpful to figure out problems. So I've done that now.
Nice.
Let's look at where we are. What I did is, and I think I have a little bit of a mea culpa, as it were. People who've been following along, there is a GitHub repo at the DevTalkShow's GitHub site. Basically, it's called Blazor Auth from scratch, and I've been trying to keep up, but I think I've made a mistake here. And in our last episode, we implemented logout, and I don't think I have it.
Oh no.
I don't think I have logout, so I think I'm perpetually kind of stuck here unless we implement logout. But I might try to skip that real quick so we can get into what we're doing. Now that I've deleted the cookie, the TDTS cookie, then okay, now I'm not logged in anymore. So if you haven't seen the shows, we have some previous shows where we basically did a file new project. We started from scratch, and then this is a component. This is not built in. This is not the support you get. We did not create this with the individual account switch. This component is it is not asking. This is not a true production level ready component, because it actually doesn't care what you type in here. Whatever you type in, that's fine. Whoops, I've double clicked there. And so now let me just refresh. Let's just refresh. I don't want to resubmit the form. And it just accepts whatever you log in as a valid user and signs you in. And I'm sure people watching might say, I don't understand the utility of that. Well, what we were trying to do, as we can see here, is we were just trying to demonstrate that your mission to sign someone in is to create a claims principal, which you can create from a claims identity that has claims, set an auth scheme, and the auth scheme is just a string that you've defined to basically tell the system, okay, this is one way to log people in. I'm going to give it a name. And then you call HTTP context sign in async, and you're good.
Yep. Nice.
Now, in a real production application, we would have code that verifies that your password was correct. Maybe some other features, maybe verify that your account isn't suspended, that you have the correct roles, you have the correct permissions. That's all this. That's what this is.
Right. But all that's on you and is custom for the application you're writing. All .NET Core is saying you're going to need these things regardless of how you're figuring all that out. So here are the pieces that you can assemble so you can do identity right.
Right. In the future, I think it might be interesting for us. So ASP.NET Identity is a feature of ASP.NET Core. There was also a version in Framework. It is a whole set of abstractions that, for one thing, get you these capabilities like sign in async. That's from Identity. It's an extension method that got thrown in once we did using Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication, and we also had to include the NuGet package. Prior to that, HTTP context was, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. So there are other abstractions. There's the sign-in manager, the user manager, the user store. These abstractions we have put to the side for now.
Okay.
When you create a new Blazor project with individual accounts, they fully embrace those abstractions. The sign-in manager does the sign-in, but a sign-in manager, when you create a sign-in manager, when you instantiate one, you have to provide a user manager. when you provide a user manager to instantiate that, you have to provide a user store.
Okay.
In that particular template, those are all already put into the dependency injection pipeline for you using EF, using Entity Framework. And Blazor will either do SQL Server based if you create the project in Visual Studio. It'll do MySQL based, no, SQLite based, which is even cooler if you do the project in the command line. And the reality is when you go to the command line and do the .NET new, you can say, no, I want SQL Server. That's what comes in the box. If we implemented iUser Store to whatever we wanted, it could be Postgres for all I care, or it could just be, it could be for demonstration purposes, it could be in memory. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if that's valuable for this show, but maybe we'll think about it. If we implemented iUser Store, we could implement the user manager for that user store. We could implement the sign, and then we would get the advantages of all of those abstractions as well. But as you know, Rich, we really tried to break this down.
Yeah.
So all we have right now is the ability, theoretically, is if you've been watching the show and you've been following along, I can literally type anything I want in here, and I will be authorized for this app as that name. So let's just pretend that that is the standard username and login path.
Okay.
What about, that doesn't solve my problem of I'm at work, we're on Entra ID.
Right.
And I want a colleague to sign in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem.
I mean, they can, right? Because it doesn't matter who's signing in, but you might want to have some role associated with who is signing in, or making sure that it's going against your valid credential store to be able to say this person has authenticated themselves at this point and not necessarily authorized themselves to do what we're doing. Is that kind of where we are yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I'm looking at this sample application. So what I'm looking at now, what everybody's seeing on the screen, this is a sample we started a few weeks ago. And what we did here is we embraced the template and said, we want individual accounts. We even want interactive auto. We wanted to see everything.
Yeah.
And I think that we've added Google support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. It's been a little while, but this will at least show us the way. I'm going to run this, and then we can start looking to see what is happening under the hood. And do I need all of that if I'm going to implement that sample application I'm talking about? Okay, so this one says, looks like you're not logged in. Okay, I see. Here's where we used our own component. Yep. But let's go ahead and use what the app says. The app says I can use a local account to log in or another service to log in. So anybody watching, you've done individual accounts. You've gone to the login page, and it doesn't say this here. It doesn't say use another service to log in. It says there are no external auth providers configured, and it gives you a link to show you exactly what to do. And I think we did this on the air. I think we did this. We added Google. Pretty sure.
Okay.
So if I just click Google here, then Google's going to take over and say, hey, the DevTalkShow website wants you to sign in with Google. We're going to share your name, email address, language profile, whatever. So I clicked it, and now Google's making me, I guess this is fine. I appreciate that Google is saying, hey, let me just make sure. This is Google doing this now. Saying, let me make sure.
And that's an important point, right?
Right.
Because it's not happening in the context of our application that we're creating. We've actually sent, because you said sign in with Google, you were sent over to Google's pages to authenticate. So it's in Google's home, essentially, you're doing that.
Yep. And just to be safe, I took that off screen, even though I was pretty sure it was going to cover the password. But we're in the age of AI, and I have heard. Actually, this is nothing new, by the way. Researchers had already been doing some hacking proof of concepts, where just by listening to the audio of you typing on the keyboard, they could figure out what keys you were typing. Now, I believe this technology is extremely expensive, and it's not something I'm too worried about people watching on YouTube. But I am hearing some people that using basically by training AI models are accelerating that research. So what I figured is let me just take it off screen. Let me talk over it, try to make it a little bit harder. I'm actually not really that paranoid about it. But the fact of the matter is I'm authenticated.
Yeah.
And if I log out, because Google has already given permission, now I click again and it should just jump in and I can just do this. Now this could be the rest of the show is log in, log out, log out, log in, log out. So thanks everybody for joining us. But how does it work? Right.
Yep.
So
what do we wire up here?
Right. This was actually the secret sauce. Is when you start this project, you're going to see add authentication was already given to you along with all this other code that sets up the entity framework. It adds the sign-in manager, adds the DB context, all the stuff that we have been, and the email, the email sender, which is the piece where it confirms that you're the user by sending you an email. We ignored all of that in our sample. We were trying to get to the heart of how do you sign somebody in.
Right.
So there is a great page in the docs talking about external logins, external authentication in ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core. And I'm going to bring that page up. We'll make sure we get this in the show notes on YouTube. And this is actually pretty darn helpful. There's a whole set over here. There's the overview, and then there's Google specifically. There's Microsoft specifically. So, and we'll add authentication in a bit. But the thing that got my attention was, okay, in this template, what are they doing? And so the way to figure that out is, let's see. We want to start by looking at the login page. So again, when you create this application and you say individual accounts, you get a whole lot of stuff in this account folder under components. And we have a login page. This is not our code. This is not our app. What we are doing is we are learning by looking at the template. And in the template, they have, this right here that we're looking at. This is the form to take your email, to take your password, the checkbox to remember you. And then right here, we have this. This is what I was looking for. That looks an awful lot like a Blazor component, right?
Yeah.
External login picker. So now my next question was, is this Blazor component something in the platform? And the answer is no. And there's a reason. The way I know that is because when we created this project, we just gave it a simple name. We called it include.
Okay.
The IntelliSense is telling me that this component comes from includes namespace, components, account, shared. So that's my clue. When I'm working with this code, just like you might be, that's your clue to say, oh, this isn't something I'm going to go out and look at the platform for. This is right here.
Yeah.
So I go to Solution Explorer and I go to Account Shared, and here it is, the external login picker. Okay.
And this probably came about because we selected on the new project template, do authentication.
Yep.
I'm not sure if we went more specific than that, but this
yeah,
was one
there's
of the
only
things
one choice though.
Right.
There's none and individual accounts in .NET 8. That's it.
Okay.
That's your choice. So when you take the individual accounts choice, you will get this in your app.
Yep. And that's the thing. It's a component. It's part of the template, and it's a component that got put in your app.
Yeah. It's a component that, yes, it's a component that got put in your app. If I can make a slight differentiation is that it's code in your app now. You own it in your application. Yeah. You're free to change it. Whereas if something's in the platform, look, you still kind of own it. You're taking, but you're not going to go changing it. You might build on it,
right?
But you're not going to change it.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? They have a component here that is asking a question. If external logins, if there's more than one, some kind of array here, if there's more than one, then let's say, hey, there's no external auth configured. Why don't you go look at this documentation to figure out how to do it? But if there is something configured, then they run through each provider that's configured and they create a button for it, which is cool.
Yeah. And we've been to websites that do that, right? log in
Right.
with your Google account, your Microsoft account, what LinkedIn, whatever it is.
Right.
This is giving that capability.
It is. It's cool, but it makes me think it might be overkill for what we're doing, because this had to be generic in terms of we want an easy way for people to get our template, get to work, add authentication from what they wanted. We don't want to have to configure anything else. It should just go. It should just work. And that's what they accomplished, because this is all the code that was required to get Google working. That's all that had to happen. Sitting back in user secrets are the client ID and client secrets. So what I'm not showing you here is going out to that dashboard and creating all that stuff. So as I started kind of diving into what's happening here, for example, what is get external authentication schemes async? What is that? That's an extension method. That's it's part of the sign-in manager. So this is not code that we own, but it's part of the sign-in manager. And it says, why don't I look at all the schemes, all the auth schemes, and if the scheme does not have a display name, then I'm going to say, okay, schemes apparently can have display names. Like, who knew? Authentication schemes, let's dive in and look at that real quick. They have names, handler types, and display names. Okay. So it says null is valid and used for non-user facing schemes. Fine. Let's go back to this code. They basically just run through the list of auth schemes, and for every one that they see where that's not null or empty, they assume that must be an external auth scheme. So let's go ahead and display it.
Okay.
And when we come back to this, to what actually happens, is we can see that they must be running. And I even actually walked through that code a little bit, which maybe we don't have to do here. And they said, well, there was an auth scheme that was built in to handle this, and then there's another one called Google. Well, that must be the external one. I kind of feel like, yeah, that's what they're doing. Is there, in fact, I wonder if I can stop on it. Let's see. I made all this talk about how I can do debug just my code. Look at that. That breakpoint's red. It's red.
We're going to hit it.
That's cool. And we're in ASP.NET Core Identity right now. We are not in anything we own.
Yeah.
This is the external login picker, which, yes, this code, if I go to Solution Explorer and click this button, it's going to tell me, yep, this is yours, external login picker. So let's refresh this. I refresh that page. It's waiting to call that method. It wants to know how many external logins are there. So let's go ahead and jump in. And first thing it does is it says, well, let's get all the auth schemes that are available in this app. And what it's going to find is, why isn't it showing me schemes? I'm surprised that it's not. I'm actually a little surprised that I'm not getting it. But if I come here, it says there's 5 right here. This is a little hard to see. Okay. Oh, I lost. I was hoping it would keep showing it to me. There's more than you'd think, though. Okay, can I zoom in on that? Oh, no. IntelliSense is, the moment I hit the control button, IntelliSense is like, oh, you must want me to be transparent for a second. And it's like, nope, I didn't really. So actually, there's another way to do this. I can come to the immediate window, and I can type schemes. And I think this is going to get me what I want. Yes. Schemes count to 5. Okay. I guess we can't actually see what they are. That's all right. No big deal. What are those schemes? There's a scheme for your internal login, for the one that, and then there's also for 2-factor authentication. There's another one that kicks off. It's going to be a little small, but it kicks off the remember me for 2-factor, and it kicks off. It says it kicks off external, but none of those have. If I drill into them, it's not going to have a display name. If I were to keep drilling in, there it is. Display name is null.
Right.
But if I back out, and it's sorry that I can't zoom in on this, at least not, actually, maybe that's not true. Can't I zoom in with, what is live zoom? It's 4. Let's try this. Okay, there we go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But here's Google. Remember I added Google in Program CS, and I provided my client ID and client secret. It has the display name of Google. So I'm not 100% sure if that was like totally by design, and I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter, because what's going to happen is when we get back here, external logins is going to have a grand total of one auth scheme because it found the one with the display name,
Yeah.
and this one is Google. So it now knows everything it needs. If you drill into handler type, you'll get a bunch of information about. There's all kinds of information about that comes along with this auth scheme to allow it to know, who do I talk to? I talk to sign in Google or something. I forget what the link is. And who do I respond back to? Who is Google going to fire its answer back to? That is all configurable, but you don't need to configure it. You just get the button works, and we're super happy. My take on this, and then we have our logout button. So that's pretty cool. All of that's great. My take on this was, now if we head back to our bare bones app, was, do I need all of that?
Right.
So I do want to create a login picker, just like our own forms-based login. So let's create a component. And let's call this, just to make sure the name is different, my own external login. And that's here. Okay, so now we've got it. We've got a new component. Any questions about that before I start moving on? Okay, cool.
That makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Now, I don't necessarily know that I need all this fancy code. Login with Google. I'm not 100% sure that I need all the fancy code that figures out whether an auth scheme is available. Like, I know what I want to do, and I know I'm linking up with Google today, because that'll save us the time from going out to Entra ID and setting all that up. But we'll want to do that, because I think that's the internal method that people are going to be looking for. That, just if you ask me.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. Yeah, we'll see where you go, because I do have some questions if I think I know where you're going here.
Yep. So all I'm going to do is say, you can log in. Oops. You can log. Boy, why is it fighting me?
You're in the code block?
Oh, well, there you go. Why am I doing this in the code block? That's silly. This is the HTML section.
There you go.
And just because we want to be a pro web developer, we'll make sure that we put this in a div. And a lot of pro web developers are cringing when I say that. You can log in with Google. Internal Microsoft login coming. We promise. Okay.
Yep.
So I stole this line of code on line 8. I stole this from the external login picker that comes with the application. And you can see what they're doing is they're looping through the providers, which is fine. Like, whatever. They're looping through the providers. But part of me was thinking, man, do I need this? I mean, I think, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. And in fact, what might be interesting, we could come back to this, right? Is we could say, like, oh, now that we have two providers, maybe we want a more elegant way to display this button. But part of me, it feels like we are trying to demystify this. So let's take out everything that's just not needed. I'm not even sure that I really need this value Google. What I have is a button that when I submit, it's going to say log in with your Google account. And this is the my own external login component. This is our brand new component. So I can go to where did we do this? We did this on the homepage.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's my own login. So let's add our new friend, my own external login. This is just to show that we're moving. Okay. Now I'm currently authorized, so let's because we're gonna have to get our logout button back. But for folks who maybe missed that show, I blow away the auth scheme cookie, and we are now no longer logged in. No, that is not production ready code, but that at least now you know how it works, right? So I click login with Google and nothing's going to happen. We have no code behind.
Right. We don't have the providers enabled in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got nothing going on. We've done nothing. All we did was put a button on a component. That's it. So the question now is to say, so what are we going to do when someone clicks on that? And probably the easiest thing to do is to say, that's interesting that all of this was done. Oh, I see. I left some stuff out here. We're going to need a form, which is okay. Because I want this to submit. I want this to actually submit out somewhere else. So we'll need a form. We're going to want to post to that form. And then because, let's see, what else do we need? I think I will accept this for now. I'm not 100% sure if I need it. And then we'll close the form. If you are watching right now and looking at the external login picker, you're going to notice that I stole most of this code from there. Yeah, what is the return URL for the provider? That's very interesting. Provide from query.
I mean, in our case, it's localhost, right? It's got to get you back to here.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Why don't we find out from our friends in the previous? Let's find out what they're doing in here. So return URL. I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint here. We are now looking at the full code from the template because I just want to see. And so for folks that are watching, if you're wondering, like, how do we figure this out? Well, now you're seeing how I figure it out. Return URL was null. So maybe I didn't need to worry about it. Right? I might, sometimes what happens is you look at the template code and you say, do I need this? And it's null. So it may not have been important.
Well,
I know that sounds weird. You're like, how? Right?
Maybe just comment that out. Because if we run into why isn't this working, we at least say, okay, well, we have this commented out here. Do we really need it?
Yeah. Well, another thing that's happening here, okay, is that just because we're kind of following their example, I'm leaving my own external login component to call some endpoint.
Okay.
That endpoint's going to do the work. That's going to do the heavy lifting.
Sure.
And the question is, well, wait a second. I don't have an account to perform an external login endpoint. So we're going to, once again, copy this pattern that's happening in the big template where you may not realize this, but you have an identity components endpoint route builder extensions class that got added to your project.
Boy, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. And what is this thing doing? This is using minimal APIs to create some what it's really creating is it's kind of creating some back end server side code that, like, I can go hit that code and then it'll do some stuff for me. Now, why is it doing that? Well, remember, Blazor has WebAssembly and interactive auto options.
Yeah.
And you can't log in from the client. Login can only happen from the server. So they map this endpoint. And that way, what happens is even if you're in interactive auto can submit a form. No big deal. Submits a form back to the server, and you take over here. So we're going to need our own version of this. I don't know that it has to be called the same thing, but we need a place to map endpoints. So let's come here, and we'll leave it. Let's see, where should we do this? It looks like we have our own login here, so we can maybe call it, I don't know. Do I want to call it? I don't know that I want it in components. I don't know that is it that important? Am I fretting over something that's not that important? let's just go ahead and create a class here. We could always move it. Can always move it, and we'll call it our. I'm using these terms on purpose so nobody confuses them. Our identity endpoint extensions.
Okay.
So we now are going to create a class, and it's going to be an extension method. And there's a reason why I want to do this, because I want to get it into the ASP.NET Core pipeline. I need to implement this endpoint convention builder extension. Like I'm not implement it. That's what I need to return. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm creating an extension method on top of iEndpoint route builder. This is how. Oh, actually, it's telling me to do that. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Copilot. Oh, and then you went away. Got it right again. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm just curious what it offered me there. Not really anything that I wanted. So I don't care that much. All right. So what do we need? We are going to create an endpoint group. This is minimal APIs. If you're not used to minimal APIs, that's what we're using right now. Oh, I love how it's offering a suggestion here. But I'm going to copy in some different code. Okay. Now, what we're doing is we're creating a group called account, and we're creating an endpoint called perform external login, which is going to be called by the previous. What is you complaining about here?
We're not returning anything yet, right?
We are.
Not all pass return.
Oh, I know why. Because we don't even have a class defined here anymore because I overwrote it.
Oh.
Yeah. I overwrote the class that we kind of need.
Here's a interesting tidbit, since you were kind of running into this from the lanky Scottish nerd. Welcome, by the way. So Alt plus brings back the Copilot suggestion and let you cycle through them.
Is it Alt plus period, maybe? Let's see. We'll see what happens the next time.
So that would be Alt period, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it might be.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So
we'll have to take a look.
We don't have to call this. Let's call this map.
Yep, just period. Okay, awesome.
Map identity endpoint extensions. Not all code pass return a value. I think that is true because I have to return the account group. That's what I have to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then look, there it is. There's the little. So, oh yeah, it even says it right there. Check that out. Alt plus next suggestion. You know, that's great. I love it. I love it. So Alt plus period brings it back. There's not many other suggestions that it's giving me, which makes sense. It's like you probably want to close that. Let me back out of there.
Yeah, there's really no other option here. So.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have our identity endpoint extensions. What we have to do is we need to make this part of our those aren't, nothing's going to happen yet until I go to program CS and we map those. Just like Razor components get mapped on line 31, we are now mapping it's map identity extensions. I might have to, because I haven't compiled this, I may we'll live with this for now. See, the namespacing I think is kind of blah, but that's all right. We can always fix that.
Okay.
So now, are you going to find it for me? App. Zoom in a little bit. And what did I call it? Map identity. Yes, map identity endpoint extensions. Now I made that name up, but now we now have endpoints in here where you can call account perform external login. So I should be able to set a breakpoint here. We have our external login picker. I should be able to go to HTTPS. And what I really wanted is I really wanted that breakpoint here because this is mapping it. This is actually executing it. So here we go. We were authorized, so we've got to get rid of that. Now there's all kinds of stuff going on in here. There's an identity external cookie. Like there's all kinds of madness. And we're not authorized. And it says, we're saying you can log in with Google. So the way this should all go down is it should be, we should end up here, but then we're submitting a form.
Right.
So that should drop us here.
Okay.
So we click and we blew up. Now, the required anti-forgery request token was not provided. And and I think I did leave out an anti-forgery token. I think I did. So let's go back to our component. And just to be inspired by the template, we're going to go look at their external login picker and look at this.
Yeah.
So let's get an anti-forgery token into form. So everybody can see right now that Blazor is always on guard for every form you create to make sure that you have an anti-forgery token, which is good. I'm glad. And that component takes care of it. Watch, famous last words. That component takes care of it. So when I click on the button, we're going to be past it. No, we're not past it. So you were right. You were right. Very cool.
It can be no, but you got to tell it regardless, right?
We have to have one. Okay. So we'll find out more about that later. But it was a hidden field in the external login picker. And then now that we have an external field, we have to go one step further. We need to supply the parameter from query here. Because since we're doing this server side, this return URL will not get automatically mapped by the model binding. Since this is a full server side rendered page, there is no interactivity on this page. We're not using a render mode of interactive auto or interactive server or anything like that. So I have to have that supply parameter from query. At least I believe I do. Let's see what happens now. Okay. Awesome. This is what we wanted. Let's see what got passed in. A provider of Google and a return URL of nothing, which maybe we'll come back to haunt us. I don't know. Now, a lot of this code was copied from their endpoint, but let's see if we can walk through it. Is because you might look at this and say, like, what is it doing? Well, the first thing it's doing is it's creating a key value pair. Well, let's just go ahead and run this. It'll be easier to look at after it's built. Is it creates essentially a dictionary.
Okay.
And the dictionary has a couple things in it because we're going to pass these items to Google. We'll go to query and results view so that we can just look at what they are. Maybe I should have done that from live view from the beginning. Results view, return URL, there's nothing, but action is login callback. And we don't even quite know what that means yet. Okay. So let's go down to the next line of code. Redirect URL. All right. So it's building a redirect URL. Oh, whoops. I accidentally made a change to the code. I did not mean to.
There you go.
It creates this query string for us. This redirect URL that it's created is account, external login, return URL is nothing, and the action is login callback. So I think what we could do, here's what we could do. We could have that component in a future episode find what page you're on and throw that into the return URL. Okay. So
it navigates you back.
Yeah, so it navigates you back. So what's really happening here is a properties, an authentication properties object is what we're trying to build up. That's what all of this was about, was let's build up an authentication properties project because ASP.NET, the platform, offers us this nice little method that challenges and returns the results in a way that minimal APIs can use as long as you hand it these properties and the provider.
Okay.
It can go look up the provider and move on. Now, this isn't going to work because what haven't we done yet? We never registered
The authentication
a
bit.
Google authentication handler. So I think in the last 2 minutes, we can get that done. That's not going to give us everything we need, but it's going to get us what we can do for today. So what do I need to do? We have add cookie. We also need add
The
Google.
add Google bit.
Yep. Which also means we need a NuGet package.
Okay.
We're going to browse. We're going to say authentication.google and hope that it comes up pretty high in the list. There it is. Cool. Sounds good. Get that in there. Because without that extension method is nothing. And here we go. Extension method's there. I think it's good now. Oh, well, except for the fact that it's not going to work. Because why aren't we? What are we still missing? We're missing in user secrets. I need to get the. That's what this is saying. It's saying go get the authentication client ID client secret. So I'm going to say manage user secrets. Which let me just double check that there wasn't a user secret in there already. I'm going to take it offline real quick. Just yes, it's a still blank file. If you're not used to user secrets, we get user secrets. I'm going to pop that in, and then that should work.
Okay.
What I want to see before we get out of here is I want to actually see the call out to Google. I know that we've got to get moving though.
Okay. And while you're bringing that along, I'm going to bring up this comment here from a little while back from Vile Krieger. Basically, is there a log in your database that tells you that someone logged in using their Google account, or is that even tracked who is logged in? So with what we have here, our application doesn't do any of that, right? It is getting to the point where it can go out and authenticate and say, yes, here's a valid token for this user, but that's all it's going to give us. If that's a requirement of your application to go do that, to go into, if it's a requirement, then you can certainly build that in and log it to whatever database or whatever you want. But on our side, we're not. Now, you might have login tracking on the Google side, depending on what you have set up. So you can look at it and say, where are all the places where I've logged in? And over there, it might be tracked, but not in our application, at least not in this point.
Right. So a couple things. I screwed up anyway, and people probably noticed that I accidentally exposed the secrets. So,
oops.
So I will be killing that OAuth client. In fact, it's already dead. So, but that credential doesn't work anymore. So, which is fine. That's something I wanted to do on the show anyway, was like, people watching, whatever. But notice that the apps request is invalid. And the reason why is because one of the things you have to go tell Google is where to expect the logins to come from. And when you're doing development, you often put in your local host or something, or we could even try using like DevTunnels or something another time.
Yeah, definitely.
But what happened there is that this application every time you create a website in a web application on your machine, it assigns it a different port. I'm sure that port didn't match what was currently sitting in the Google dashboard. And if we had more time, we could go rectify that. Yep. But what I wanted to show was, yes, it went out to Google.
Mm-hmm.
And Google said, oh, you know what? Don't recognize where this is coming from, so I'm going to deny this request.
Yeah, which is great because you want to. Yeah.
We're on our way.
Come from one spot
with code that we wrote instead of code out of the. I wish we could have gotten more, but you know what? It's almost time for stand up. So we will have to come back and finish off getting the information back from Google and getting signed in, because it's a lot less code than what comes in the template. Not because the template is bad, because the template is trying to be more generic and say you might want to register 1, 4, 0 of these sources, and I want these Blazor components to react to all those scenarios and do the right thing for you. And all you have to do as a developer is just say, add Google, add Microsoft, add Twitter, and you're just done, and it works.
Right.
So we're saying the approach I'm taking is, but I don't need all that generic ability. I know what I want. Can I strip it down and get to the place I want to get to.
Yeah, which is, lighten up the load of code that you have inside of there, which is great.
Yeah, and I think also more importantly, you understand the code that you own now.
Right. Yeah. So getting lots of different scenario options in there. It's great for getting started, but I think driving in a little bit to understand them, but also be able to only have what you need.
Yep. Control-Alt-Enter also generates 10 suggestions. Man, I'm going to try to remember all this stuff. Thank you so much for these tips from the Lanky Scottish Nerd.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I did not know that one. Cool.
We have more to do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you all have a great day wherever you are. And if it's time for stand-up, then, grab that cup of coffee and get over there. And Rich, hope you have a successful day.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
All right.
See all of you next time. Yep. Go ahead. You take us out. Sorry about that.
So for Chris, yeah. How do we do this? Thanks for watching, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think, and hopefully we'll see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.